Hey guys. Um, Something that I didn't mention in previous videos, I don't think, that I did over the summer that I thought might be interesting to share. I hiked a section of the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina. I have had sort of a low-grade obsession, if there is such a thing, with the Appalachian Trail since the 6th grade when our science teacher showed us a documentary or something, and my best friend and I at the time decided that someday we would hike the trail. We would through hike. Clearly that never happened, but I've always wanted to hike chunks of it, or that seemed like the most reasonable thing to do. I'd like to through hike someday, but with my schedule right now, it really doesn't work. But hopefully in the next couple of years, maybe. So anyway, I had the opportunity to hike a section through the Smokies, and anyway, things didn't quite pan out as exactly as planned, but I did I did get to do some miles before the Smokies and right up to, which were wonderful and fantastic and every bit as illuminating in many ways as I'd hoped they would be. And I'm planning to start at Springer next summer and see how far I can get in what time I have. Basically, I'll probably set aside a few weeks and do that. I really have fallen in love with the trail, and I really enjoyed my hiking experience. And I've done shorter hikes, but long distance hiking is really its own beast. And something occurred to me while I was out there that I've since sort of been forcing my pagan friends to talk to me about and address with me. And that is this concept of a nature religion, right? So I know I've talked about this in previous videos, and I've certainly blogged about it and ranted about it while drunk, and even got into an argument with Ian Corrigan at Starwood about this very thing. And of course, there are lots and lots of problems with the phrase nature religion. The big one being that nature doesn't really mean anything. It's just like witchcraft. We have to put it into a context. And nature tends to be that which we have placed as outside of our human realm, right? Like, nature is a thing that you travel to. Nature is a thing that you get back to. You have to embrace nature. You aren't just necessarily part of it. That's how we talk about it. And of course, this dichotomy between human stuff and natural stuff is really problematic because it's arbitrary and it changes. And anyway, but all of that sort of fell by the wayside. Laundry's done. All of that sort of fell by the wayside when I was actually on the trail, which I ended up hiking by myself. I was initially supposed to go with people, and they bailed on the first day because one of them was injured, and I opted to keep going. So I'm in the woods by myself, and it's the closest thing to a wilderness experience that you can really have at least in North Carolina. So you're in backcountry. You're seeing, I saw people at the shelters when I would arrive, but during the day I was generally speaking by myself. And maybe I would see one or two other hikers on any given day. But anyway, so all of that stuff that I was talking about a second ago were definitions of nature and whatever, and that whole philosophical conversation just sort of flew out the window, and I had this moment where I was in the North Carolina backcountry by myself, trying to decide whether or not I was, like, am I hungry or am I just exhausted, and just the only thing you've been thinking about all day is when the next time you get to eat is, and whether or not that noise could possibly have been a bear. And it occurred to me that Wicca is not a nature religion. Like, it just isn't. Like, if we define, even if we think of nature as being this thing that's beyond humans, that sort of occurs in the world that we have to seek out, and it has something to do with, like, primal instincts or whatever. I'm not really clear on that. there's nothing you can do in a living room or a backyard or at a festival that in any way resembles any of the experiences that I had in the mountains of North Carolina. I mean, it's just not like anything. You're alone in the woods, and you're not... When you first get out there, there's lots of room for introspection, and you're by yourself, and you're thinking about how you live back home, and you're kind of, you spend days doing that. But eventually, all you're thinking about is what's going on right there with you, and how much food you have, and how heavy your fucking pack is, and wondering whether or not that movement in the brush is an animal that wants to eat you, or whether or not the hiker behind you wants to murder you or something, which, odds of that are extremely slim. But hey, it's happened on the AT before. Anyway, not hiker against hiker, generally speaking. Usually it's just like interloping crazy person against hiker. But anyway, you're not thinking about... I wasn't having any of these deep, like, spiritual quandary sorts of things that I was anticipating. And I just... It's made listening to neo-pagans of various stripes talking about nature kind of absurd. I don't know. I don't even know exactly what I'm saying or what I'm trying to communicate to you exactly, but there is no comparable experience to actually being in backcountry and having to take care of yourself. And if that's what nature is, then Wicca, Neo-Paganism, whatever, like, none of it's like, it's just going to the park and, like, hanging out with cultivated bushes and butterflies and, like, taking your dog on a walk and whatever, just is just as unnatural as anything that's going on in my suburban sprawl neighborhood or downtown. I don't know, just... I was thinking about how odd people's conceptions of nature are, and how drastically mine is. And I very consciously try not to live with this dichotomy between natural and unnatural. And my mind is that there's no such distinction. It's something that human beings create, and just by virtue of existing, it becomes natural, right? But anyway, yeah, not a nature religion. Like, agricultural religion, sure, but there's... And it's made the whole, like... when people talk about totem animals and things like that, it's made so many things like that for me even more just kind of ridiculous. Like, when you're actually like legitimately worried about bears, listening to people talk about bear being their totem because it came to them in the dream, and knowing that they have never actually had any kind of encounter with bear in bear territory. And, like, I'm talking about the Smokies, right? So, like, there's a higher ratio of black bears to people than there are, I think, anywhere else in the country. But even so, like, we're still talking about black bears. It's not like they're grizzlies. Like, the odds of being actually attacked or eaten or whatever are, like, so just minute that they're hardly even worth considering. But you're not really thinking about statistics when you're walking in the woods. You're just thinking about how, well, yeah, I mean, like, it's conceivable. It's not impossible. Anyway, it just makes the guy at Open Circle talking about bear being his totem a little bit harder to listen to. So, anyway, I went hiking over the summer, and it was fantastic, and I'm really excited to go back. And if you're really interested in connecting with nature or whatever, I would suggest trying long-distance hiking, because it's awesome and enlightening. So that's all. Hope you guys are doing well.